The soft hum of the air conditioner was the only sound as I stepped into my house earlier than usual. My wife, Amanda, was still at work, her high-profile legal career keeping her away most nights. I told myself I didn't mind. Our suburban home, with its pristine white walls and carefully curated modern furniture, was supposed to be our shared sanctuary. But lately, it felt hollow, as if the silence between us had become another piece of decor. Zira, I called out, shrugging off my coat. The alien maid emerged from the kitchen doorway, her bioluminescent skin casting faint, shifting patterns across the walls. Zira had been with us for 6 months, a decision born out of equal parts charity and curiosity. Amanda had insisted on hiring her after she crashed on Earth, claiming it was our civic duty to offer refuge. To me, Zira was more of an enigma, her quiet demeanor and otherworldly grace unsettling in ways I didn't like to admit. When she didn't respond to my call, I walked further into the house, expecting to find her tidying up or absorbed in her quiet routines. Instead, I froze in the doorway of the living room. Zira stood near the window, her back to me, topless. Her pale silver skin shimmered faintly in the soft evening light, its glow pulsating like ripples on water. Her long, willowy arms cradled something, a delicate, glowing object that seemed alive with energy. I swallowed hard, my breath catching in my throat. "What are you doing?" She turned slowly, her dark, reflective eyes meeting mine without a hint of embarrassment. Her expression was serene, almost curious, as if my reaction was the anomaly, not her state of undress. "I am cleansing it," she said softly, her voice lilting with the faintest trace of an unearthly accent. She held the object up for me to see, a crystalline sphere radiating with a soft, hypnotic light. "What is that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My eyes flickered to her face, but I couldn't help noticing the elegant, unfamiliar contours of her figure. "It is a bonding artifact from my world," she explained, as if it were the most ordinary thing. "It holds memories, connections." I thought it needed purifying. I tore my gaze away, shame burning in my chest. "You shouldn't. This isn't." I trailed off, unable to find the words. Zira tilted her head, studying me with quiet intensity. "Does my form unsettle you?" she asked, stepping closer. "It is not taboo among my people." The tension in the room was suffocating. My heart pounded, and I couldn't tell if it was anger, discomfort, or something far more dangerous. "You need to put on a shirt," I said finally, my voice harsher than I intended. Her gaze lingered for a moment before she nodded and left the room, the glowing artifact still in her hands. I exhaled sharply, staring after her. The house felt even emptier now, and I wasn't sure why. That night, the house felt unnervingly alive. Shadows shifted in corners where there were none before, and faint echoes seemed to trail behind every sound. I blamed my own unease, yet I couldn't shake the image of Zira standing by the window, her alien form shimmering like liquid light. I told myself it wasn't attraction. It was fascination, the kind any man might feel when confronted with something unfamiliar, something forbidden. I found her in the study, kneeling on the floor and meticulously arranging books that Amanda never read. She looked up as I entered, her expression calm but expectant. The glowing artifact sat on the desk beside her, its light pulsating softly, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. "Do you always leave your duties half done?" I asked, leaning against the doorway to mask my nervousness. Zira straightened, her movements fluid and unhurried. "Your presence earlier disrupted my routine," she said. There was no accusation in her tone, just observation. I crossed my arms, unsure why I'd come to her. "That thing," I said, nodding toward the artifact. "What exactly does it do?" She hesitated, as though considering how much she should reveal. "It is a vessel," she finally said. "It preserves connections between beings. Memories, emotions, fragments of what we share with one another." Her words struck an uncomfortable chord. "And why are you cleansing it?" "Because it is mine," she said simply. "And because it is full." I frowned. "Full of what?" Zira stood, her luminous eyes meeting mine. loneliness, longing, things I carry but cannot keep. Her honesty was disarming, and I found myself lingering instead of leaving. You make it sound like you feel the same things we do, I said, trying to keep the conversation neutral. Her lips curved slightly, a near smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Do you believe I am incapable of such things because I am not human? I opened my mouth to respond but faltered. Did I believe that? If so, why had I felt something stir in me earlier? Something I couldn't name and didn't want to? Zira stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. Humans seem to fear their own desires, she said, her voice soft but unrelenting. Why is that? I stiffened. Desire has consequences, I said curtly. She tilted her head, studying me. And yet, it drives you. I turned away, heat rising in my chest. You wouldn't understand, I muttered, though the words felt hollow even as I said them. I understand more than you think, she said quietly. Your memories are loud. They echo through this house like the wind. Her words left me rattled, as though she glimpsed something I hadn't meant to reveal. I didn't respond, and the silence stretched between us, heavy and electric. I should go, I said finally, though I made no move to leave. Yes, Zira replied, her gaze steady. But you won't. I lingered in the doorway, trapped between guilt and an undeniable pull I couldn't explain. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Zira, serene, unashamed, holding that glowing artifact, rose unbidden in my mind. Amanda's absence only amplified the silence, the kind that made every thought louder, more insistent. Around midnight, I left the bedroom and found myself wandering the halls. The dim light from the study drew me in, and before I could talk myself out of it, I was standing in the doorway again. Zira was seated at the desk, her silver skin bathed in the artifact's glow. She didn't look up immediately, her fingers tracing intricate patterns across the object's surface. You're still awake, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. So are you, she replied without turning. I stepped into the room, hesitant but unable to stay away. You said earlier that this thing preserves memories, I began. Does that mean it holds yours? Everything you've experienced? Zira finally looked at me, her reflective eyes unreadable. Not everything, only the moments that mattered. Her answer unsettled me. And what happens when it's full? She tilted her head, considering. It must be emptied, or it will break. That is why I cleanse it. I hesitated, unsure why her words hit so close to home. And what happens to the memories you remove? Do they just disappear? No, she said softly. They linger like echoes. They are not mine anymore, but they are not gone. The room felt heavy with unspoken truths. You sound like you regret some of the things it holds. Her gaze didn't waver. Don't you? The question sliced through me, exposing something raw I'd buried for years. I thought of Amanda, of how our conversations had become clipped, our affection rode, our once vivid connection now a shadow of itself. I thought of the nights I spent wondering if she even noticed the growing distance between us. I don't know, I admitted, my voice low. Zira stood and stepped closer, the faint glow of her skin casting soft light between us. Regret and longing are not so different, she said. They are both born of the same ache. Her proximity was intoxicating, and I didn't move as she raised a hand, her fingers brushing my wrist. The touch was light, almost tentative, yet it sent a shiver through me. You're playing with fire, I murmured, though I made no effort to pull away. Fire only burns those who fight it, she replied, her voice a whisper. Before I could stop myself, I leaned in, closing the space between us. For a moment, the world narrowed to just her warmth, her scent, the pulse of the artifact's light growing brighter. Then, as if sensing my hesitation, Zira stepped back. This is not my decision to make, she said softly. Her words were a mirror, forcing me to confront the man I was becoming. As she turned away, I stood frozen, the weight of what almost happened pressing down on me. And yet, I didn't leave. Morning came too quickly, its pale light creeping through the curtains and dragging me from restless sleep on the living room couch. I had fallen there after hours of pacing, my mind a storm of guilt, desire, and denial. Amanda's side of the bed had been empty when I left, as always, but for the first time, it felt like my absence might have gone unnoticed. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of movement in the kitchen. I rose hesitantly, running a hand through my hair, and found Zira at the sink, her graceful movements as measured as ever. She was fully dressed now, her silver skin dulled slightly in the daylight, but her presence still commanded the room. She turned as I entered, her reflective eyes unreadable. "You look tired," she said simply. I didn't respond, instead pouring myself a cup of coffee and standing on the opposite side of the counter. The distance between us felt like a fragile barrier, one I wasn't sure I could maintain. "Last night," I began, my voice rough, but she interrupted me. "There is no need for explanations," she said softly. "What nearly happened does not need words." Her calmness unnerved me. "That doesn't mean it didn't happen," I muttered. She regarded me for a moment, her head tilted slightly. "I will leave," she said finally. "It is clear that my presence here causes conflict." Panic flared in my chest. "You don't have to leave." "Yes, I do," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. "You are bound by connections I cannot share." Her words struck me harder than I expected. I set my coffee down, unsure whether I felt relief or loss. "Where will you go?" Zira gave a faint, enigmatic smile. "That is not your concern." She stepped past me, her movements as fluid and deliberate as always, and placed the artifact, the crystalline sphere, on the counter. Its glow was fainter now, but it still pulsed faintly, as though it had absorbed the weight of everything left unsaid between us. "This belongs to you now," she said, her fingers lingering on the sphere. "It carries echoes of choices, both made and unmade. Perhaps it will help you understand yourself." "I don't want it," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Zira paused, her gaze steady. "Perhaps not, but it is already yours." Before I could respond, she turned and left the room. A moment later, the front door opened and closed softly, the sound final and unrelenting. I stared at the artifact, its faint glow casting soft patterns across the counter. I wanted to destroy it, to rid myself of the reminder of what had almost happened. Yet I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Hours later, Amanda came home, her heels clicking against the floor. She greeted me with a distracted kiss and barely glanced at the sphere. As she disappeared into the bedroom, I remained in the kitchen, staring at the artifact. It pulsed faintly, an unspoken truth that would linger, unseen but never gone.